Hey, good morning, friends. I have something here that God has been asking me to share with you. I wrote it on a piece of paper because I want to read it off like a story. Because if I don't, my thoughts will go all in a jumble and it won't make sense to you. So I'm just going to jump right in. So last Friday on the 6th of March, my child woke up at 3:30. After I put him back to sleep, I couldn't go back to sleep. Imagine that. God started saying to me, validation, validation, your validation. I want to validate you. So I began thinking of maybe making a video of how God has been validating me. And like always, I have to write things down or my thoughts will go all in a jumble. I got my journal out to refresh me on the ways that God has been validating me. Sadly, I don't write all the things down that I should. I want to do better at that. I started a new page and wrote down the reasons why I struggle with my self-image. Some of the reasons are, I was never given a lot of validation as a child. I don't have a lot of memories where people said, I'm proud of you. You're doing an awesome job. You're beautiful. In other words of validation. I do remember the English people that came to our produce stand who would often comment on how beautiful me and my siblings were. Beautiful, cute, you're handsome. Talking about my brothers were the words we heard. As an adult, I heard it a lot more. But up until recently, I didn't believe it in my heart. It was all head knowledge. Yeah, my parents never validated me as a young child, but they were probably never validated either as young children. So I don't hold that against them. That was the culture we grew up in. Don't give them a big head about themselves seems to be the reason why. I don't know for sure. As I was writing these things down, a memory came to mind, or you could say God led me to it. One day in school, when I was about the 2nd or 3rd grade, my teachers came up with the brilliant idea that everybody was gifted in some unique and special way. And they were so right. So they got the whole school to share with each other how they were gifted and talented. A show and tell sort of thing. Little did they know what would happen when it came my turn to share. So it came my turn to share my gift and talent. I could not think of one single thing that I was gifted or talented at. I sat there for what seemed like 15 minutes or an eternity to my little girl mind. It was so humiliating. It was so embarrassing. Every single student in that room was looking at me. I felt like they were laughing at me, and I'm sure they weren't. I could hear them saying, "You're a good-for-nothing little imp." I was really small for my age back then. "You will never amount to anything of much good. You have zero talent. You can't even get your lessons right." I learned differently than most kids back then. "See, this is why you had to do a grade over. See how dumb you really are? You are so dumb." I could still hear that earth-shattering silence in that room. That clock never ticked louder. Finally, one of my teachers spoke up. She said, "There's got to be something." She started going down a list. Can you move any of your body parts in a unique way?" "No, I can't do that." There was not one single thing I could do on her list. I think even drawing was mentioned. No, I couldn't do that as a young child. That's actually a lie that I believed since I was 5 or 6. That's another story. Finally, my teacher asked if I could walk on ledges. Like, do I have good balance? I began to think of how I practically flew around the sandbox. Why yes, I could do that. There was hope. I have good balance. Now came the second hurdle. Since this was a show and tell sort of thing, I had to prove myself. We ran into a predicament. There was no ledge for me to walk on. A student mentioned that I walk on a ledge that was on a desk. It was sort of a bookend decoration and add-on to the desk. My heart sank. It was maybe half an inch wide. I thought, they have no idea how wide those ledges on the sandbox are. They were about 6 inches at the smallest, and the rest were larger. You're a fake. You can't really walk on ledges. They had to move on. There was no ledge for me to walk on. I was somewhat relieved. I didn't have to prove myself on a half an inch ledge, but I was severely disappointed. Who was really going to believe me if they couldn't see it? And how was I going to prove I wasn't a fake? You know, this is a crazy thing. I dreamt the other night I was homeless. Where do you think I went for shelter? To that school. I broke into that schoolhouse and found shelter and slept. This dream happened before God brought the memory back. My invalidated little girl heart was left there. On that day, God wanted me to go find her and validate her. So I called out to her. I said, "Little girl, look at me, please." She didn't look up. I told her I loved her, that she has meaning and purpose. She has gifts, and that her gifts would be discovered later in life. She still didn't look at me. I hunkered down beside her in that little schoolgirl desk. I said, "They didn't believe you, did they?" She looked at me, the tears rolling down her cheeks, and sadly nodded her head. We embraced. I told her once again I loved her and that I believed in her. I told her she was gifted and talented and that they would be discovered later in life. Then I told her she would be an amazing mom and a wife and a talented cake decorator. And that she is also gifted in other areas that just haven't been discovered yet. I told her I wanted her to meet someone who would validate her more than any person ever would. I introduced her to Jesus. Oh, the happy reunion. This story might sound crazy to some. This story isn't me talking to an imaginary person. It's the grown-up me healing a wound and putting truth to lies. I am the only person who can do that, along with the help of Jesus, who can heal the wound. Because it is oh so painful to walk back into those memories and retrieve that little girl heart. My heart was left in that one-room schoolhouse so many years ago. I completely stopped believing in myself. It didn't just happen on that day. It was a lifetime of no validation. And that day was the final blow to my self-esteem. A child does not look to themselves for validation. They look to grown-ups to validate them. Just as you look to Jesus, others, and yourself for validation. You can pump yourself full of positive things and try to validate yourself, but if you don't believe it yourself, you will never get anywhere. If you find yourself struggling with something, do not be afraid to deal with yourself. Do not be afraid to face those memories. Yes, it is tough, and you will probably cry. I have done it often enough to know what is on the other side. It is awesome. It is freedom. I'm not saying I will never struggle with self-image again, but putting truth behind what happened is empowering. Little did I know until that memory came back that was holding me back from who I was really meant to be. I wonder what happened that day in the spirit realm. I get this vision of two heavenly beings going, God, what are we going to do now? God puts a finger to his lips. Shh, I have a plan for her. We are in a battle on this earth. Things are not what they seem to be. There are deeper things here at stake. It's important to have that constant relationship with God and having that protective cover. One last thing. Me being willing and knowing how to handle that little girl memory didn't just happen overnight. This has been in the works since I was maybe 17 or 18. I was introduced at that age on how our brains work and why it matters what happens to you from conception to the very breath that you breathe right now. These things have been kind of dormant in me for a long time. But just recently, a guy by the name of Ray Hurst came into my life, who is a life coach. He led my dad in doing a father's blessing over me. Since that day, there has been a portal open between me and God, like never before. God has been so real to me, and the ride has been incredible. And 2 books that have led me in the same path are Wild at Heart and Waking the Dead by John Eldredge. If you want something bad enough, you will find it. Ask and you shall receive. That's all, folks. Bye.